Boker Tov lekulchem. Today is a critically important day as we commemorate those lost in the Holocaust. I want to thank all of our students for bringing a sense of the seriousness of this day to our ceremony today. While we should all look forward to times when we can gather and celebrate together, today we can take comfort in each other's presence and know that we stand together as a community, both in the good times and as we navigate challenges and sadness. This year, our Yom HaShoah commemoration is spotlighting heroism. Heroism performed during the Shoah, as well as years following the Holocaust. There are so many who exemplify heroism, but sadly, many of those names and deeds are lost as a mere footnote in history. What did heroism during the Holocaust mean? It meant literally putting yourself and your family in mortal danger, knowing that helping a Jew meant death. For the Jews themselves, heroism meant the possibility of seeing one more precious sunrise. Today, this characteristic embodies the memory of those lost and commemorates the Jewish culture that was once so vibrant in many shtetls, towns, and cities across Europe. I invite each of you to keep these people in your hearts throughout our ceremony.
Where there is darkness, there is also light. Though too often it's difficult finding the light while being masked by the dark. Where there is tragedy, there is triumph. Though too often it's difficult finding triumph when tragedy seems to lie all around. Where there is evil, there is also heroism. Though too often it's difficult finding the heroism when evil shows itself so transparently. During the course of my nearly 3 decades in Jewish education, there has always been involvement in Holocaust education. During many of those years, the same message is shared with a tikvah, the hope that some significant change occurs, but that progress is far too slow moving. But what change? Over the course of the last 2 years, you've heard me share that prior to World War II, there were approximately 17 million Jews in the world. By 1970, some 30 years after the Holocaust, there were 12.5 million Jews worldwide, a 26.5% decline. By 1980, the Jewish population rose to 12.8 million. By 1990, 12.86. By 2000, 13.2. 2010, just over 14 million. Today, a little over 15 million Jews globally. However, that's still 13.2% shy of our population numbers from 84 years ago. Numbers always tell the story, and this story is one that is simply incomprehensible. The number 6 million gets tossed around far too liberally, nearly reduced to an historical statistical afterthought. Let me offer you what 6 million represents. 6 million represents grandparents who can't spoil their grandchildren because both aren't here any longer. 6 million represents spouses who won't raise a family. 6 million represents birthday candles that won't burn out because they don't exist. 6 million represents Kaddish that is said far too often and for over far too many years. 6 million represents empty playgrounds, barren synagogues, and towns and cities that used to have rich Jewish populations, now without a single Jew. 6 million represents a population that is altogether too shy of the 17 million prior to the Shoah. In fact, that 6 million represents the fact that projections, according to Yad Vashem, should be nearly 33 million today, April 18th, 2023, had the Shoah not occurred. Without a significant increase in population, how do we keep memories afloat and the message of never again alive? How do we convey accounts of the atrocities of the Holocaust when the youngest survivors are now in their 80s? We need heroes. It's as simple as that. From the righteous of the nations who during the Shoah hid Jews, putting their own lives on the line, to a Jewish prisoner saying Shema before they went to sleep, possibly for the last time in Birkenau, to those in 2023 keeping alive the memories of those who perished and survived, from Dr. Janusz Korczak, who stayed with his Jewish orphans under his care till the very end, and from Chana Senish, executed by firing squad in 1944, but whose enduring courage parachuting into enemy territory to help defeat the Nazis and help her fellow Jews was not only forever inspirational, but undoubtedly heroic, to Mordechai Yanilevich, leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, who fended off the Nazis for 3 weeks with makeshift fighters and makeshift weapons, to Henrik and Joanna Elskamp, and how they put their own lives on the line to save a Jewish girl in the Netherlands during World War II. But also to people like Dorota Budzinska. Who? Dorota Budzinska. Given the prestigious Pauline Award to the righteous of the nations for preserving the memory of Jews who once lived in the little shtetl of Dąbrowa Białystok. Dorota is a teacher of Polish literature at her local high school, but also the town's docent of Jewish life. While Jewish people haven't lived in Dąbrowa since it was liquidated in 1942, when all Jews went to the Treblinka extermination camp, she has championed Jewish memory and Jewish heritage. As an example, once a month, Dorota leads a group of her high school students to take care of the town's lone Jewish cemetery. The group pulls weeds, takes care of headstones, and any aesthetics that require tending to. Dorota is a modern-day inspiration whose efforts go largely unnoticed. After all, how many here have heard of the name Dorota Budzinska? She is a beacon of light in the world, a world that can use all the inspirational rays of sunlight possible. Dorota is a modern-day hero. The Jewish world requires more heroes. We live in a world where anti-Semitism is not veiled beneath undertones of nuance. It is overt and unrelenting. We need heroes. Within the last 6 years, there have been tragedies in Pittsburgh and San Diego, and most recently in the holiest of cities, Jerusalem. We need heroes. Where does this heroism start? It starts right here, in this very place we're gathered today, and so many other students like you across the world, for a tekes, a ceremony for Yom HaShoah. Heroism begins with education. We champion the efforts of survivors who came to this country and established Jewish day schools so that a tragedy like the Shoah can never happen again. This begins with a knowledge acquired that only a Jewish education can offer. In a time when anti-Semitism has overtly revealed itself in ways we have not seen since the 1970s, this is exactly the time when we bask in the sunshine of Judaism and the pride of being Jewish. It is about looking at the darkness and instead seeing light. It is looking at the tragedy, but instead only witnessing triumph. And when evil reveals itself, we, the collective we, only see heroism.
תחילה הם באו בשביל הקומוניסטים, ולא דיברתי, כי לא הייתי קומוניסט.
First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist.
ואז הם באו בשביל הסוציאליסטים, ולא דיברתי, כי לא הייתי סוציאליסט.
Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist.
אחר כך הם באו בשביל האיגודים המקצועיים, ולא דיברתי, כי לא הייתי איש איגוד מקצועי.
Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist.
ואז הם באו בשביל היהודים, ולא דיברתי, כי לא הייתי יהודי.
Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew.
ואז הם באו בשבילי, ולא נשאר אף אחד לדבר בשמי.
Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
My mother did a lot of amazing things. All the Jews rounded up, whether they were in the ghettos or in any of workforce, and taken away. And she had about a week heads up for that, and kind of just formulated a quick plan to sneak them out of the laundry room, out of the camp, down the streets of the town, and down into that basement. She came in the kitchen and put her groceries down and opened up the basement door, and as often, some of the women came up to help her with the evening meal. And she said they were cooking and talking, and there was a noise at the door, and the major had let himself in and was just staring at them. Because these Jews worked at his laundry room, he recognized them immediately. She literally ran after him and grabbed a hold of his legs and just begged him. She just said, punish me. They haven't done anything wrong. These people are innocent. And she even said, kill me.
I don't know how to name it, but I would say just human feelings. We saw a child in mortal danger. We knew that we had possibility to take her and to protect, and it was beyond our feeling or thinking that we would reject it. We did not say, look, we want to save you. No, but it came by coincidence. But in this coincidence, we found ourselves to be menschlich.
Była u nas dziewczynka żydowska, ta dziewczynka żydowska, którą wyprowadziłam osobiście z getta. Ale w każdym narodzie są tacy sami ludzie. Są dobrzy, źli, okrutni, tacy, którzy mają serce.
Reach out, touch people, don't be a bystander.
Now what I would like to say to young people of today, I would ask them not to be indifferent. Not to be indifferent when they see something wrong going on and in which their intervention could help.
המאבק הקשה לכולם הוא המאבק שבתוכנו. אל לנו להתרגל ולהסתגל לתנים הללו. מי שמסתגל מספיק להבין בין טוב לרע, הוא הופך לאבן בגוף ובנפש. מה שעלול לקרות לך, זכרו תמיד, אל תתכוונו להתקומם נגד המציאות. Mordecai and Levitch.
The most difficult struggle of all is the one within ourselves. Let us not get accustomed and adjusted to these conditions. The one who adjusts ceases to discriminate between good and evil. He becomes a slave in body and soul. Whatever may happen to you, remember always, don't adjust, revolt against the reality. Mordecai and Levitch.
What happened exceeded our boldest dreams. The Germans fled twice from the ghetto. It is impossible to describe the conditions under which the Jews of the ghetto are now living. Only a lucky few will survive. The rest will succumb sooner or later. My life's dream has come true. I have witnessed the glorious and heroic combat of the Jewish fighters. Mordechai Analevich, in his final letter to his deputy, Yitzhak Zuckerman, April 23rd, 1943. Mordechai Analevich is a symbol of courage in a period when the survival of the Jewish people was in doubt due to the atrocities perpetrated by the Germans and their allies. Analevich was born in 1919 in the town of Vyshkov, Poland, to a family with financial hardships. He grew up in poverty-stricken neighborhoods and attended Laor Jewish High School. At the age of 16, he joined the Hashomer HaTzair youth movement, where he excelled as an organizer and youth leader. In 1939, after the occupation of Western Poland by the Germans and the occupation of Eastern Poland by the Soviets, Analevich reached the southern part of the Soviet-annexed territory in an attempt to cross the border into Romania and to thereby try and open a route for youths on their way to Palestine. Unfortunately for Analevich, he was caught at the border and interned in a Soviet prison. But after his release, and despite the danger, he traveled to Warsaw, which was occupied by the Germans, and from there to Vilna, where refugees, members of youth movements, and political parties from Warsaw were gathered. Analevich strove to return the core group of counselors to German-occupied territory in order to continue underground educational activities and political work. Analevich devoted much of his time to self-education, especially the study of Hebrew, history, sociology, and economics. In 1942, as the deportations of Jews from the ghettos to the death camps were increasing as part of the final solution, Analevich traveled to the city of Częstochowa in western Poland to organize the resistance movement. He returned to Warsaw after hearing of the mass deportation that had begun on July 22nd, 1942, in which most Jews of the ghetto were sent to the Treblinka death camp, and co-founded the Jewish Fighting Organization in the Warsaw Ghetto in October 1942. On January 18th, 1943, the small uprising began, led by Analevich and a handful of Jewish fighters, in which they attacked a German convoy carrying Jewish deportees. Most of the Jewish fighters were killed in the battle, but Analevich survived by overpowering a German soldier, even taking his weapon. The deportations were halted for some 4 days, and for the next 3 months, Analevich focused on acquiring arms and planning the next battle. In April 1943, Passover Eve, the liquidation of the ghetto began, and the underground underground organizations started to resist. The uprising, which began on April 19th, lasted some 4 weeks and is considered the widest urban civilian uprising of World War II until that time. Taking part in the uprising were underground groups such as the Jewish Military Union, which fought alongside the Jewish Fighting Organization under Mordechai Amalevich, and the ghetto residents who holed up in bunkers and hiding places. On May 8th, the Germans captured the main bunker at 18 Miwa Street. Mordechai Amalevich was killed in this battle at the young age of 24. Under Mordechai Amalevich's leadership, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising became a symbol of the Jewish armed resistance in the Holocaust.
ישנם כוכבים שזוהרם נראה על פני כדור הארץ למרות שהם נכחדו זה מכבר. יש אנשים שהברק שלהם ממשיך להאיר את העולם למרות שהם כבר לא בין החיים. אורות אלה בהירים במיוחד כאשר הלילה חשוך. הם מאירים את הדרך למין האנושי. חנה סנש.
There are stars whose radiance is visible on earth, though they have long been extinct. There are people whose brilliance continues to light the world, even though they are no longer among the living. These lights are particularly bright when the night is dark. They light the way for humankind. Hannah Sen. shel hamachar, ela hanashim chayim. Hem zechim shityachu alechem beritzinot. Yesh lachem zechot lakabel yeches, shel mevugarim ba'adinot, ubechavot, keshavim. Sarich lev shar lachem latzamuach lemishachem nado lechiyut. Hadam halo yadua, betoch kol echad, machem hu hatikva lati. Janos Project.
Children are not the people of tomorrow, but people today. They are entitled to be taken seriously. They have a right to be treated by adults with tenderness and respect, as equals. They should be allowed to grow into whoever they were meant to be. The unknown person inside each of them is the hope for the future. Janos Project.
This memorial here at Treblinka has very special meaning to you personally. Tell us about Janusz Korczak.
When you think of Janusz Korczak, you're talking about the ultimate educator. If you take all the well-known educators of the 19th and 20th century, Piaget and John Dewey and all that, they did not have as much insight into the child as he did. And in addition to which, he loved the children. At the same time, he actually gave his life, literally, to comfort children. He could have left the ghetto. He didn't have to even go into the ghetto. They were well-known individuals. There were friends, Polish friends who were going to save him with no difficulty at all. But he felt as a father, as the protector, he must be there. And so he willingly went into the cattle car at the Warsaw Ghetto with the children. 193 children into the cattle car to comfort them. Why? It's dark. They don't know where they're going. He's with them.
This well-respected educator from Poland, like you said, could have escaped that fate.
Oh, no difficulty at all. In fact, the night before the children were being deported, one of his Polish friends came into the ghetto with papers, so that even though he was alone coming in, two of them were allowed to leave. He bereaves his friend, saying, how can you ask? How can a father leave a child to be in a dark place, scared? Who's going to come?
Separated from the parents, these little children.
These are little children, many of them were orphans or partially orphans, and neglected children.
He was a real hero of yours.
Without a question.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Poland, he is well known. There are schools, many schools named for Janusz Korczak. There is a museum in Israel called Yad LaYad. Half of the museum is about Janusz Korczak and his children. We don't have too many sculptures in America of Janusz Korczak. But I hope we will have more.
כצאצאים של חסידי אומות עולם, המשפחה שלי פיתחה קשר חזק מאוד עם העם היהודי וההיסטוריה שלו. ההורים שלי כל כך אהבו את ישראל, שהם החליטו לעבור לכאן.
As descendants of righteous among the nations, my family developed a very strong connection with the Jewish people and their history. My parents loved Israel so much that they decided to move here. Noah Van Overkirk, granddaughter of Henrik and Joanna Elskamp, righteous of the nations.
My great-grandparents and my great-grandmother's brother both stayed Jews in the Netherlands during the Second World War. My name is Noah Van Auker. I'm a soldier in the Israel Defense Forces, and my family is righteous among the nations. This means 20-year-old girl called Esther, but for her safety, they called her Annie during the war. My grandma was around 5 years old during the war and thought Annie was a part-time nanny. But the reality was, she did not know that her parents were actually hiding her in the attic. From 1942 and until the end of the war, my grandma thought that Annie was going home every night. Her parents only told her the truth after the war. My grandma then asked her parents why they would do such a thing, why they would take such a risk. And they responded, because that's the right thing to do. A person is a person, and everybody's life is worth saving. My great-grandparents kept everything they did during the war to themselves. The tree in Yad Vashem is in honor of my great-grandmother's brother and his wife. The Dutch underground resistance were looking for families to take in Jews during the war. So Cheri and Evert Kesselboom, the brother and wife of my great-grandma, put themselves and their children at risk by taking in Yuli and Benjamin van Engel in 1943, a young Jewish couple with 3 little children. Arrests were increasing in the Netherlands, and the final solution was already implemented all over Europe. But thanks to the courage and selflessness of Evert and Cheri, they were all reunited after the war. In 1979, my family and the Van Engel family came to Israel together and visited the Yad Vashem Memorial. As an act of gratitude, my family members were officially recognized as righteous among the nations. I am very proud of my family's history. For many generations, my family has built a very strong connection to the Jewish history and its nation. My parents have raised me with a very strong love for Israel and its history. Every one of us understands just how important it is to serve our communities and our country, which is why I'm proud to do what I do. I am proud to be a soldier in the IDF.
Dorota Bujinska might be a name that gets lost among the 1 in 7.9 billion names on planet Earth, but that one name stands out among the 7.9 billion other names. Just 4 years ago, in 2019, Dorota was honored by the Polish Museum, located in the former Warsaw Ghetto, for her efforts among the righteous of the nations. Why haven't you heard of her? Because she is committed to her work without fanfare, social media publicity, or ego. She simply does it as it is the right thing to do. Dorota, who is on your far right with her class, is a teacher of Polish literature at the only high school in a small town in northeastern Poland called Dąbrowa Białystok, population 6,147. The town might be tiny, but the impact Dorota has made is larger than large. The Jewish population in Dąbrowa was liquidated by the Nazis on November 2nd, 1942, and sent to the Treblinka extermination camp. Jewish life in Dąbrowa ceased to exist from that moment forward. However, through the efforts of this remarkable person, Jewish life and memory are still alive. There is still one remnant of this Jewish life that remains, and that is the Jewish cemetery. Through Dorota's efforts, she and her students clean the cemetery once a month, no matter the weather. They pull weeds, they clean debris, and they take care of the headstones. Dorota is a righteous human being among the nations. Since 2016, she has been implementing her original program, Reading the Ashes, in the footsteps of the Jews of Dąbrowa. She created a website devoted to Jewish Dąbrowa. She collaborates with the international project Bridges of Multiculturalism. She participated in the production of T. Wisniewski's film Absent Family about the history of Dąbrowa, and the release of the album Kaddish de la Dąbrowa by the outstanding artist and author, the son of Jewish Dąbrowa survivors, Marek Podwal. she maintains contact with the descendants of the Jews of Dobrova, Bialystoka to this day. And that includes Shana Tova emails prior to Rosh Hashanah and every other Jewish holiday without missing a single one. Of the descendants Dorota keeps in contact with, I am one of those descendants. Many members of my family were liquidated in 1942 from Dobrova to the Treblinka death camp. I have visited the town, I have met Dorota, we toured the cemetery which was rededicated and restored in 1992 by the efforts of my late grandmother Lily, my great aunt Rena, and cousin Mordechai. May their memory be a blessing. Dorota is an upstander in a world that simply lacks upstanders. I will forever be grateful to Dorota and her efforts as a champion of Jewish memory and never be quiet about those efforts. I, for one, will never be quiet about never again, nor is Dorota. She is a remarkable human being. Dorota is a righteous among the nations.
We light this candle to rekindle God's flame, to shine his light upon the world once again, to sanctify the memories of the millions of souls, to honor their prayers and all their lost hopes. We bless their existence by being alive, to light these candles as proof we survived.
I light this first candle for the Shoah, to honor the righteous of the nations who knowingly placed their lives in danger to save others.
I light this candle of hope, that the world community will find ways to intervene in situations where ethic or economic tensions are threatening to turn murderous. May there be no more days of destruction, days of catastrophe, anywhere in the world, never again.
I light this candle today as we remember, and because so many families were completely wiped out, leaving no one to say Kaddish in honor of parents, children, relatives, and dear friends after they died.
I light this candle in the memory of the 2,350 Jews of Dobrova and from shtetls alike throughout Europe.
I light this candle to show all Custaniers that their efforts are wasted words and show that we know what really happened.
I light this candle in honor of all the survivors still sharing their stories of horror and fright. It is through their stories we pass along their knowledge to the world framed in the famous words, "We will never forget."
Please rise for a moment of silence.
moments, I will recite El Malei Rachamim, as well as the Kaddish, to commemorate the lives of those who were murdered in the Shoah. Many of us have probably heard the Kaddish a million times. It is recited in various forms many times throughout the course of a year, a month, even of a single day. If we study the origins of Kaddish, however, and even if you just read through a basic translation in any siddur, you'll see something that might strike you as odd. Kaddish does not actually make any reference to loss of life or grief. Even though this prayer is most famously said to commemorate the loss of a loved one, the words themselves do not actually reflect that custom. The prayer itself is about God, Hashem, specifically God's name. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah. May God's great name be glorified and sanctified and made holy throughout the world, and so on and so forth. And the Kaddish ends off as a prayer for peace. Oseh shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al Yisrael. May he who creates peace in his celestial heights in heaven also create peace for us, for all of Israel, and for the world. Beautiful. But I'm still wondering, what does this have to do with mourning, to experiencing extreme loss, like the Shoah? When tragedies happen, many of us might feel this impulse to try and figure out some sort of rational explanation. Why did this thing happen? How could this thing possibly happen? To decode how all of the puzzle pieces actually do fit together, and figure out some sort of rational explanation, how God's plan would make sense if only we could understand all of the background and all of the hidden workings and all of the things that we can't see as human beings. We see this impulse from none other than Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshat Shmini, which we actually just read this past Shabbat. During the dedication of the first ever Mishkan, just as a fire descended from heaven to consume the korbanot, the sacrifices that were brought to mark the day to Hashem, what should be a glorious and celebratory occasion, a happy gathering, tragedy strikes. Nadav and Avihu, two of Aharon's sons, are swallowed up by God's fire when they bring what the Torah describes only as an eish zara, a strange fire that they brought at that moment. When Aaron's two sons are consumed tragically, Moshe immediately rushes to give an explanation. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, hu asher diber Adonai lemor, bikrovai akadesh ve'al penei chol ha'am ekaved. Then Moshe said to Aaron, this is what God meant when God said, through those closest to me, I make myself holy and gain glory before all of the people. Perhaps Moshe was feeling the pressure as a leader of the entire Jewish people watching at this very moment, completely in shock. No idea what to think. And he felt the need to try and publicly make sense of this tragedy in some sort of way for his people. Perhaps we can understand where he was coming from. This is an explanation that maybe we've heard before, and maybe is even comforting on some level, Moshe's explanation. God takes from this world those people who are closest to him, those who are the holiest. Those are the people that God takes before their time. Similarly, we could say that the victims of the Nazis and the Shoah were taken because they too were holy, and God wanted them closer to him in heaven, so to speak. However, even this moving explanation is not one which I will offer today. It's not one which I'm going to give. Today, Yom HaShoah is not a day where we attempt to explain horrific things which deny explanation. There is no such logical explanation beyond the recognition that true evil exists in this world. What is the fundamental response to tragedy then? How do we respond? Not one of words, but one of silence. We see this when our communities hold a moment of silence to commemorate the loss of life, as we just did. We also see it in the response of Aaron HaKohen, Aaron, to his brother Moshe's explanation for what happened to Aaron's children, Nadav and Avihu. How does Aaron respond to the death of his sons and to Moshe's explanation? The end of the pasuk tells us, Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. For those who are experiencing loss, no words are enough. We too have no words to face such tragedy. While we can't control or explain how tragedy strikes, what we can control is how we live our own lives in response. As we've just learned about many heroic figures during the period of the Shoah, heroes are people who act in a time of need, who step up to do something which is brave or difficult or perhaps unpopular or even unsafe in order to save and assist the lives of other human beings. Heroes are not the people who give the best explanations. Explanations do not matter when it comes to suffering. What matters is, when we see suffering, do we avert our heads and pretend that it isn't happening, or do we stand up and act and be vocal in whatever way is needed? Back to Kaddish. As a response to loss, individuals, or genocide even, Kaddish is fundamentally a denial of explanation. We don't bother getting into explanations of how bad things happen. Instead, we simply declare that God is holy and we bless God's name. But God's name doesn't just become known in the world as holy on its own. That's not how it works. God's name doesn't do anything on its own without the people who worship God. As Jews, we have the fundamental concept of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of God, making God's name holy through our own actions and the way that we treat others, that we treat all of the people around us. Kaddish is therefore not just a statement. It's not just saying God is holy, but a charge for us to actually act in a way that is Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, to act in a way that sanctifies the name of heaven and makes God look good through us. Implicit in Kaddish is a demand of everyone listening, and everyone listening today. It's a demand that if God's name is to be made great and holy and widely known in this world, who actually needs to work to make that happen? It doesn't just happen on its own. We have to do it. How do we best honor the lives of our loved ones and ancestors who perished in the Holocaust, whom we look up to as martyrs, who died al Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of God? Not with words, not with explanations, not with logic, but by continuing ourselves to work for Kiddush Hashem, to make God's name holy through spreading love, kindness, and chesed in every moment that we spend in this world around us. May their memories be forever a blessing. I'm going to recite El Malei Rachamim, followed by Kaddish. If the bell happens to go off in the middle, please just remain seated for another moment. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utarim, Kizoar Harakia Mazhirim, L'nishmot Kol Acheinu B'nei Yisrael, Shenitzvechu V'Shoah, Anashim, Nashim V'Tach, Shenechveku V'Shenisrafu V'Shenehergu, Shemasru et Nafsham Al Kiddush Hashem, B'Gan Eden Tehi Menuchatam. Ana Ba'al Harachamim, Hastireim B'Seiter Kinafecha Le'olamim. Utzror B'Tzor HaChayim Et Nishmotehem, Adonai Hu Nachalatam, V'Yanuchu V'Shalom Al Mishkevotehem, V'Nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the souls of our brethren who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes. May their memory endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace, and let us say Amen. Yitgadal v'yitzgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad zivra chirutei, v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mivarach le'olam lo me'al maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yit'ala v'yithalal shmei dekudsha berichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata tamiram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom araba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, huyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen.
I would like to thank Rabbi Oz. I'd like to thank all of our students who led us today. I would like to thank Mr. Schumann for his vision for how we can commemorate Yom HaShoah as a community, for all those who joined us in live stream. And I really want to thank every single one of you who are here in this room. While you were watching the presentation, I had the privilege of being able to see you and to see how seriously you took this tekes and how you brought your best selves. And I want to say toda rabba and kol hakavod. I'm going to dismiss you by grade. I'm going to ask you to maintain this level of seriousness as we dismiss. We'll leave as quickly as we can, and we're going to stay quiet as we do. And I thank you in